We're live.
Okay, we're live. This is the Policy Committee meeting of the Clarke County School District. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Dr. Thomas, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, is it by policy committee or?
Yes.
You want to? Okay, let me, hold on. All right, Mr. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Dr. Maddox,
Here.
Dr. Gantz.
Here.
I think that's everyone, right?
Yep, that's it.
And no extras?
I don't see any extras.
Okay.
today.
Okay. Do we have a motion to amend or adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay. I would like to make a motion that I've talked to the committee members about already, and that is to step down as chair of the policy committee and assume the role of vice chair, and to elevate Trish as chair of the policy committee. So that is my amendment to the motion to adopt the agenda. Is there discussion on that? I'm not sure where to put it though.
Oh, Greg, is that a substitute motion? There was a motion to adopt the agenda as is in a second. Is that a substitute motion that you?
Yeah, should I have made should I have made the amendment earlier?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but Mr. Davis, I think it's something that can be decided and announced, because the chair and co-chair, to my recollection, was not something that was voted on.
Right.
It was just decided by the committee.
Oh, okay.
I think it's as simple as notifying the committee. Does that sound right to everybody?
It works for me.
I was going to ask Attorney Pruitt, or if he could do it under his chair report without having to amend the agenda, and it could just be under the report. But if it's if it doesn't have to be action, right, Dr. Myers? I don't know. Attorney Pruitt?
Well, apparently we're just working on consensus, and there was no vote in the first place, so I guess there's no need for a vote now.
Okay. So we did not vote for committee chairs, Mike?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
No, I don't think we did, Greg. I don't remember us voting for a chair. And well, I don't know. I take that. I feel like in property, but I think it was more consensus. It wasn't a vote. Do you remember, Tawana, when we were in policy?
Yeah, I don't believe it was a vote. Yeah, it was just more consensus.
Okay, well, then we will just keep the, I withdraw my amendment to the agenda, and we'll call for a vote to adopt the agenda for the policy meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think I heard everyone say aye. I say aye. Any yays? Okay, so we have adopted this agenda. We have the previous policy minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at them?
Yeah, they looked okay.
Any discussions? If not, then is there a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
There a
Second.
second?
Second.
All those in favor? Please
Aye.
say aye. I hear Tawana say aye.
Aye.
And Tish,
Aye.
okay, Lakeisha and me. Okay. So now we are to the superintendent's report.
Yes, sir. Mr. Davis and committee members, I have 3 items that I needed to cover briefly under my report. Dr. Myers, do you have a preference in which order between HR, discipline, and cognia?
No. It's whatever way you want to do it, Dr. Thomas.
I always want to, I would like to start with the easiest, but whenever you think something is easy, it becomes the most complicated. But I will begin. I don't know if you all recall, probably a couple of months ago, Ms. Duke presented some compensation studies and comparisons to us and other districts. And one of the things that came out was that Clarke County was kind of on a different spot in terms of what 12-month employees worked. And so we put in one of the board updates that the recommendation for us to be aligned with other counties was to move from a 248 to 240. And that is going to require some policy changes. So I'm going to ask Ms. Duke if she could speak about that. And Dr. Myers, would you like for them to go ahead now during my report, each of you speak on those areas, or later?
I think it'll come up naturally during the policy discussion, but it's helpful for you to have teed it up and give us that context and remind the board members that this is not brand new news.
Right.
It's kind of a procedural administrative decision that was decided, but it now needs to be reflected in policy to shore up the details of the policy.
Several places in our policy references the term 248, and so it would need to change to 240. So when we get
Actually, Dr. Thomas, actually, we're
Yes.
removing that. We're just going to refer to it as 12 month.
okay. So when we get to that point, Ms. Duke, and I think that will keep us from having to go to this place each time, being specific about, instead of being so specific about the number of days, just saying 12-month employees. And Ms. Duke, I'm sorry, can give a little more historical perspective to the study that was done that got us to that place.
Good.
Next, I have the Cognia spreadsheet that has been shared with you all by Dr. Myers. So based on our Cognia report, and I've also shared a tentative document with Dr. Gant that we're working on. And once it's a little more finalized, we will share that with the entire board. That does some of the same thing, which is breaking down our Cognia report into categories. But what Dr. Myers and Ms. Tillman did was they created a policy revision schedule spreadsheet, and they've expanded that now to include tabs, and she has shared that with you all. And so they are color coded, and with red being policies before 2007, yellow being 2008 to 2013, blue being 2014 to 16, and white 2017. And that is in reference to Cognia making statements regarding the age of some of our policies and policies not being revised. And in some cases, there have been revisions to some of those policies. And so what Dr. Myers has done is just provided that spreadsheet for you all so that you can see the age of some of those policies. Dr. Myers, is there anything you would like to add here?
No, I'm flipping through on the screen now. This first tab we've had for many years, and it's the way the district takes a comprehensive look at all the policies in order in the policy manual, and then they're color coded, as you said. One way to look at revisions is to look at the oldest ones. And so Ms. Tillman made us another tab. Then you'll see red is first, and then it goes down into the yellows and the blue. And so this is just another way organizationally to see if the committee so desired to take the oldest policies first, this is where you would start. And then the final tab on this document, I kind of lifted out of the Cognia report some of their specific recommendations where they mentioned policy. And so if the committee chooses to start here with ones that were referenced by Cognia, this would be the place to start. Now I will say that in the Cognia report, they did mention this was just a random sampling of policies. So I'm not suggesting it's the most important place to start. It's just simply the ones that they highlighted in the report and some of their other recommendations, like including some language about a policy revision schedule in policy BDA, which is actually BCA. There were a couple of places in the Cognia report where they didn't, they got our policy titles wrong. But at any rate, it's just the references to policy in that comprehensive report are here for the policy committee to consider.
And I'm sorry, Don, did you email us that? Is that, or did you send us a link to that? Some
I
of those
did.
pages.
I did. I can
Okay.
send it. I did.
It's okay, I'll find it. I recognize some of it, but I don't recognize all of it. So I must have missed a tab or something, but
Oh, yeah,
I'll go
to
back
it.
in.
That's when you and I spoke. You said
Oh,
it'd be helpful to us if we could take
Yeah.
a look at what Cognia recommended. So that's exactly what I've done, is just done
okay,
work for you to tee it up. The third tab is anything that Cognia said related to policy.
Yeah.
It's kind of a place to start.
okay. So this is in the Google Docs that's still live online somewhere? It's not something you emailed us. I'm just getting used to the system that it's a Google Doc that's live.
It
Okay.
is. And so
Okay.
whatever one I emailed you before, well, if
Or
you-
I downloaded it like a crazy person.
well,
Yeah, okay,
it'll have all these tabs in it
Okay.
now. And again, it's really, I don't have a recommendation of where to start. It's just some choices for the committee to consider. Because quite frankly, when I look at some of the policies on these last revised date, while some of these dates I know are troubling in the 90s, quite frankly, some of these policies, they reference perhaps a big federal law or state statute that hasn't changed and doesn't need to change. It might be something like it's important to educate homeless students, or we allow students who are married to be educated. If you're 17 or 18 and you're married, there's a policy that says you can enroll in school with us. Well, that hasn't changed, and nor should it. So in some ways, I understand that we should have updated dates, and it would be really nice if the policy committee worked through and we at least put eyes on all the policies more frequently than we have, no doubt. But I really want to make sure that no one has more alarm than they should, because like I said, some of these policies that haven't been touched in so long really aren't going to need any touching. They're just going to need to be redated and reviewed. But if there had been an urgency, if it were impeding the practice of the school district, if it had been getting in the way of us doing best practices and what's right for children, I can guarantee you would have already seen it. We would have brought it to you. So I hope that helps to reassure you, but also to say, yeah, we have some work to do, but there's nothing in here that has substantially negatively impacted the lives of our students because it hasn't been looked at since the 80s or 90s. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I ask, I'm a little bit confused. So that spreadsheet that you just had, not the one that's on the screen now, but the previous one.
Just reshared it, Mr. Davis, with the 4 of you so that it's at the top of your email.
Okay, at the top of.
Yeah, there's 3 links in that email. The policy update schedule, I think, is what it was called, Greg.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, but you said these were the ones that were specifically mentioned in the let me get my words right, but in the report.
In the Cognia report, on the 3rd tab that I'm showing now on the screen, I just simply pulled out anywhere in the report that they mentioned policy and some of their recommendations. Some of their recommendations are kind of very wide sweeping, like closely review and update the policy manual as a whole, revise the policy manual to ensure all system policies are current and adhere to state law. I just lifted their language from their report. And then they did say, with the caveat, this is just a random sampling of some district policies that they pulled out. I don't know their rhyme or reason. I don't know if they went to the C section and grabbed one or two in the E section. So again, I'm not suggesting these are the most germane, important to address. However, if we want to come back to Cognia in December and say, we heard you, we addressed the policies that you brought our attention to, this would, we probably don't want to leave any of these untouched by December. If we can't get to the entire policy manual, it would be my inclination that we would at least want to review and consider the ones that they specifically drew our attention to, understanding that they mentioned it's a random sampling.
Dr. Myers, just so I can clarify, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to, I think, answer part of what Mr. Davis was asking as well. So the document that she shared has 3 tabs at the bottom. One is a list of all policies. One is a list of policies by last date revised. And the third tab that she's putting up is then the Cognia policy recommendations. All 3 of those different sets of information, or the same information presented in 3 different ways, are all in that one document that I just reshared with everyone. So when you click on that first one, that is every policy that we have, and you'll see that it has multiple colors throughout because Dr. Myers and Ms. Tillman did those by code. Then if you go to the second one, they're done color coded because they're done by date of last revision. And then that last one is strictly what was in the Cognia report. Is that correct, Dr. Myers?
That's absolutely correct. Thank you for adding that clarity, Dr. Thomas. That's right. So again, there's no right or wrong way. You know, the policy committee, to remind you, kind of made a decision maybe 18 months ago to start chunking sections of the policy manual. We moved through the Bs. It took about 18 months, but we moved through the Bs. And we said, we're going to tackle some personnel policies, partly because Ms. Duke and Ms. Pageant were ready with their revisions. And so they had the bandwidth in their division to bring the policy committee a whole bunch of J policies. We've been working through those. Then the decision was made with the last policy committee chair with Dr. Knox. Hey, let's look at, after we get through the Gs, let's look at the J policies. Those are relevant to our students. There's some of the policies that are a little easier to digest and understand than maybe the financial policies. Let's tackle the Js and let's get those all updated. And that's what we've been working on accomplishing, recognizing that each month there occasionally are policies that come to the forefront because legislature has made a change, because something's happened in best practice. So all the while, even if we chunk the policy manual and try to only focus on a certain section, there's always going to be more timely issues that come before the committee. And so it's just that tension and that struggle of the both end, and how do we move through? I think the Cognia recommendations are clearly, they're good ones. All boards of education should closely review and update the policy manual as a whole. I will only say we've been working on that. We've tried a couple different approaches, and this is simply a tool organizationally to help the committee really decide how you want to spend energy, not only from now until December, but going forward into the future. But it would be my recommendation that Cognia would perhaps, if they pulled out a random sampling, they might go back to that random sampling and see what we've done with them. So it would at least be a place to start. And that's why I pulled these out.
And this is not, I mean, there were other policies, other B policies that were specifically mentioned at great length. That goes without saying that we would look at those.
Well, you know, I didn't include those. They did talk about BH, but they didn't talk about, with the code of ethics, they didn't talk about it as if it needs revision. They talked about it as if it needs training and understanding. So that's a really good point, Mr. Davis. And I can certainly go back and add anytime they mentioned a policy. It seems to me the work of the policy committee is around revision of policies. But if we want to include any policies that kind of the board maybe under the recommendation of Cognia should be paying attention to as far as training and understanding, I can go back and add those as well. I tried to tease out the policy action recommendations versus the policy understanding recommendations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would just recommend that, like BC, when they talk about establishment of the agenda for the work session, that we certainly are going to be expected to have a discussion on that. And then also in terms of, yeah, in terms of BH, you know, I was thinking, and maybe we needed to add something about the fact that that will be reviewed yearly and signed by all board members or something like that. I'm just throwing that out there. So I felt like that, you know, the BCB, of course you got, you know, the BC, the BH, the BAB, which is just a review, but certainly the BC, BH, and BBC, dealing with board committees, seems to have been confusing to them. So
Okay, let me go back and add those. It'll be
yeah,
easy
those
to
three.
use this spreadsheet as kind of they were made reference to, and then the committee can decide, hey, maybe this isn't a revision issue, maybe it's just an opportunity. And quite frankly, and I've said that before, sometimes revising a policy serves a dual purpose. It might not have any changes, but it gets everyone to read it and it brings it to everyone's attention. And so that is certainly a perfectly legitimate use of the policy committee time to review a policy and even just say no changes, but let's make sure everyone understands this. So
Right.
I can certainly do that, Mr. Davis. I think that's a good recommendation. I'll go back and add those to this tab.
Okay. Okay, very good. Dr. Thomas, we got kind of strayed away from your report. You're muted, Dr. Thomas.
There we go. I'm sorry. My third one is simple because it will come up as Dr. Myers gets to policy on the code of conduct, but she did provide in the agenda a summary memo from Dr. Welch, and that data and research that he has gathered was used as the basis for recommendation for the changes to the code of conduct. And there has been no public comment unless something has changed since I last spoke with Dr. Myers, no comment on those proposed recommendations to the code. So those were just my three summary areas, and I can now step back and allow those individuals we'll move through the agenda.
Can I ask you one question, Dr. Thomas, about
Yes, you can.
I noticed that and then Lynn spoke out too about it, that we were talking about, of course, the change from the 248 to the 240, but then we, in terms of full-time employment and maybe substituting full-time employment or year-round employment.
12 months, yes.
You know, 12 months. But I've noticed that two of the policies we're reviewing today, we've actually are making a change to 240, you know, from 248, scratching out 248 and putting 240 on there. And I didn't know if we're now going to change it another way, or
We just need to decide as a committee which language we want. There's two options, basically. When it was reviewed by Mr. Pruitt, it said 248 to 240. And so we can decide that as we're going through them. If it brings clarity to say 12 months, then that's how we'll go forward to the board.
okay, sounds good.
Mr. Duke, you have recommended the 12 months. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
And Dr. Thomas, thanks for that. The memo from Dr. Wells is in the agenda. It's linked in the agenda for the work session.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank
Oh, okay. I was something.
And it's a policy matter, so it's very relevant to talk about for certain, because at the work session this Thursday and then at the voting meeting next Thursday, the annual review of the code of conduct is going to be up for discussion. And so we can certainly talk more about it Thursday, but I think Dr. Thomas was drawing your attention in the work as you review materials for the work session.
Thank you.
That memo from Dr. Welsh, and what we really want is to make sure that everyone is aware that the changes recommended in the code are aligned with his research recommendations, policy and practice recommendations. And so hopefully,
Thank you for that clarity, Dr. Meyer.
Okay, now we move on to the Policy Committee Chair report. I think aside from, us looking at the Con Ed,
Yeah.
Cognia stuff that Don just mentioned, I think that was what I was going to talk about if I was going to do so as chair. I would now like the opportunity to kind of switch gears and to recommend that Trish has been willing to serve as it said that she's willing to serve as chair of the policy committee. So I would just as soon kind of step back and become vice chair and turn the reins over to her.
Hey, Greg, I was just trying to go back and catch, look at information from our policy.
Right.
Under committees in BBC, it says that the members of the standing committees shall be Board of Education members. And at the December work session, members, chairs, and vice chairs will be determined through consensus of the board.
Right.
Committees will be responsible for the Board of Education or whatever. And I wonder if we need to have this under an item. I know we've already sort of gotten the agenda, but it is a work session because it does say the consensus of the board, not necessarily the consensus of the committee. But then again, it also says December, but I would imagine you're stepping back from the position. But just making sure that I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be consensus of the board, but that's just something I came across and not sure what you
I was thinking about that. I mean, now, obviously, the president cannot serve a committee chair because it says that specifically in the policy. So that would leave, I guess it does not exclude in fact, I know it must not, because we've had a vice chair of the board serve as a vice president of the board serve as a chair of a committee. So, I mean, we can certainly do so, whatever you think.
Well, that's why I'm just asking you all. I don't know. And so I'm just asking, it just says consensus of the board. I think it only makes sense, for Tish to be in that role, but.
Yeah, I just really cannot, I can't devote the time. So, I mean, it is a matter of now, presumably, if I resign as chair, she would automatically step in as chair. Is that the way it goes? Maybe. I mean, we've already established our committee.
Right.
And so the purpose of a vice chair is to step in if a chair cannot, fulfill a function. But I'm certainly, if it's something that, Mike?
also ask Angela to look on the January policy committee minutes and maybe we can just know once and for all. I'm sorry, if I would have known, I could have looked at them ahead of time. Sorry. We're going to check and double check. In January, did the committee elect chair and vice chair? That'll decide that.
Yeah, and that's not so my question is not necessarily around voting, or my point is not around who it is more so about the process. And so it says that the board will have a consensus. And so I guess my question is, my point, I should say, is that we're not the board, we're a committee. And so just, is it something that needs to just be mentioned at the board meeting and general consensus sought so that we're still at least in line with that part of the process that we have right now? So it's not about voting and not necessarily about who it is. It's about the process.
I mean, I think when I was there at the property meeting, when Charles was selected as chairperson, and I don't think that ever went to
The full board.
full board.
Okay.
So anyway, Mike, you want to weigh in on this? I'm just trying to streamline the meeting.
Mike,
I honestly never knew how officers of committees got chosen in the first place. I mean, y'all went to this consensus framework and had the white sheets of paper up there, and I don't know if officers were chosen in that same process or at some later point, or
yeah.
each committee just sort of did it individually, like you were saying with property.
Well, that's how we did it. I mean, our first policy meeting is when we decided, and the same thing with the Government Relations Committee. So, I mean, we've done it on the committee level. Now
Okay.
But I think we have presented it to the board during the committee report. And I don't know that there was a vote, but it seemed like we were sort of checking to make sure that the officers were okay with everybody. But so I would suggest, if you want, Greg, if you want to step away from this meeting, I can take over just like you described, because I'm the vice chair. And then maybe we can work on do we need to bring this to the full board on Thursday, add it to the agenda? Seems like it could be a consent agenda point, but
then we need to do it for the other committees too. So I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, maybe we just keep it how it is now, but I definitely think this is probably an area that policy should take a look at. Although I don't think the committees were mentioned, the numbers on the committees, but it just might be a good time to also just be sure that process is clear and that practicing the process.
Yeah, I would say the committees would select their chair. I mean, I don't know, because how can the full board select a chair that's not on the committee? So
Dawn just sent me a copy of your minutes from your first January meeting that says the officers were elected
by the committee.
Dr. Maddox made a motion for the policy committee chair to be filled by Greg Davis and co-chair by, cuts that off, but obviously Dr. Yeager. Seconded, motion passed.
Yeah.
So that has, so we just need to be sure with that whoever chairs the policy committee and that we at least take a look at that, so we can be sure that the language is clear, and then that our practices are, consistent with the language.
Okay, well, we've got Don's adding BBC board committees as one of the Cognia policies that we're gonna, look at. So we can review it at that time.
yeah. You're on the list.
Any other discussion? Okay, Trish, are you okay with assuming, or you want me to finish up the meeting?
We're just going to work through the policies, right?
That's it.
I can take over.
Okay. Thank you.
So let me pull up I can't see the fine print on the shared screen. So let me pull up my board docs. So the attorney's memorandum is part of the agenda, but it's also written in front of all of the policies. So should we just skip over the memorandum and move to old business?
I think
Or do we need to?
that's how the committee chooses to work through the policies. It works best if Mike's input on policy changes immediately precedes the discussion.
Okay.
So that's fine.
So, yeah, so there were no impacts that I could see in his legal, or no legal implications. So we're good to go on that. So moving to old business, we have BCBI, public participation in board meetings, which I believe went up for public comment, went to the board for a vote and was sent back to our committee after some discussion. Dawn, how do you want to do this? I'm still learning. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, this one is truly at the leisure and pleasure of the committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis had some thoughts about, maybe it just needs to leave well enough alone, and that's fine. I just wanted that to be something that I was deciding, but the committee. So
Yeah, I would move the table.
Move to table, or I was thinking about this, changing it to something a little milder to members of the public must follow the direction of the board president, or they will be asked to leave the meeting without any like long-term consequences, but giving a explicit control to the board president to ask someone to leave the meeting. Is that mild enough? Do people think? Should we come back with something like that? Or do you really just want to totally table it?
I would presume I would propose to table it because I think it raises a concern that we've had in the past, but I don't think it's a concern it's first and foremost something that needs to be on our plate. So.
Tawana, did you have a thought?
No.
You're okay to table it, or do you want to try to clean it up?
Whichever way you all want to go with.
Dr. Gant?
I'm okay with tabling it. I think whenever we do come back to it, I do like the recommendation. I thought like the piece that you mentioned, Tish. But I think it's honestly, I think with all of our policies, this including, we have to look at the reasons that we're creating policy. And so, that my views remain the same about the policy itself as it exists right now, but I'm okay with tabling it. Whatever the will of the committee is, if we need to work on it and move it back, but my general views still remain the same about the policy.
Yeah, so my sense is that the urgency has been removed because we aren't having in-person meetings, and the only public feedback right now is through letters. So it's not urgent until we start having in-person meetings again. So I guess maybe we could table it until then.
And if I could make just a comment on terminology. So table is actually when you postpone something during a meeting. You can have a motion to postpone either to a time certain or indefinitely. But all of that is implying that you're coming back to it at some point in the near future. So maybe what you want is a motion just to make no revisions to BCBI. And then that way Dawn doesn't have to keep up with it on the list of things that are on the table.
Or putting it in old business every single week. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So the motion to make no amendments, is that what you said? I'm sorry, I was half writing it down.
Yeah, motion to make no revisions to the
No
policy.
revisions. Okay.
I make that proposal.
So Mr. Davis, do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I will.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
I guess that's passes. Okay. So motion to make no revisions to BCBI has passed, and it's removed from our docket for now. Okay, so then the next policy was the foreign students switched to non-citizen students, and there was a policy and a regulation, and the regulation is completely rescinded from what I can tell, and the policy has some wording changed with a large chunk removed. Dawn, I think you guys went back and kind of clarified what you were trying to accomplish with this. Do you want to describe it briefly?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So really, sometimes you peel an onion, and this is what happened. We were trying to fix erroneous language in JQKAR, the reg around F1 visas, that no one knows how it got in there. 20 years ago, someone confused F1 and G1 visas. At any rate, as we were trying to change that, and in keeping with the board's desire from the last policy committee meeting and work session to remove language that refers to students as foreign, we actually confused two sets of policies. And so you're going to see in new business the actual policy that does relate to exchange students and would be germane to any type of visa status that cultural exchange students come to in our county. And so it gave us a chance to look at that one, and lo and behold, that one needs some benefit from some clarification. So we'll get there. But in order to then fix and clean up JQKA, to make it not say that to take out the word foreign, which is problematic, the recommendation is to really in JQKA change the name from foreign students to non-citizen students, and clarify with reference back to a huge federal law, a federal case and subsequent law that says that public school districts need to enroll students regardless of their immigration or citizenship status. And that's what Plyer v. Doe says. We don't need to recreate policy in any way. We just simply need to reference, yep, we would of course follow that federal guidance. And so it really is going to clarify the whole spirit and intent of this policy. I was reluctant to say we don't need it, because I think we're a community that wants to say we welcome all students, and we understand the, I'm sure somewhere in the country there's a place that has said we don't want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
And so if the board chooses, I think the way to resolve this is change the name to not say foreign students and have this one policy reference back to Plyer v. Doe. And then we really don't need the reg. The reg is so antiquated. The language in it makes no sense. It goes in circles. It's what we were trying to fix.
Yeah.
There's really, and this is Mr. Pruitt's thinking, and I totally agree, rescind, which is what we're trying to do overall in the policy manual. So let me just remind the committee, when anyone takes a look at our policies, we have too many regs that aren't really necessary. If we don't need a reg, it should be rescinded. We should simplify our language and make it easier to understand. And this is a great example of an effort to do just that.
Okay, so this one went up for public comment, but did not receive any, but it came back to us after some discussion. Is that right? So does it need to go up for public comment again?
It does, because it's substantially revised yet again. It's better.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. This is part of the policy process.
Right. Okay.
And takes time, but we're at a better spot with this whole set of policies than we were when we started. So it's good work. It just has taken a couple tries and that's okay. We'd rather have it be right. And so let me actually, you can see there that it's really just saying, of course, we provide equal opportunity for all, for a quality education to all students residing in Athens, Clarke County without regard to citizenship or immigration status. And again, the reference to the federal law signals to anyone reading, this isn't something that we decided we have to comply with, but that's why.
Right. Okay, so any more discussion on policy JQKA and rescinding the regulation? Thank you, Dawn. That seems like a really good cleanup.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, here's the reg. You can see the language. It's trying to differentiate between immigrant foreign and non-immigrant foreign, and that didn't really make any sense. And then it was into this tuition and fees business and F1B. That's where we got all tangled up. It really, it doesn't make sense. I don't know. It was written so long ago. I can't account for it. It talks about transferring credit. Well, there's no difference in how we transfer credit for a student that moves from Wisconsin or that moves from Bolivia. We analyze their transcript, we issue the credit, and we place them appropriately. And so again, maybe that wasn't always the case, but it certainly doesn't add any, this reg does, it adds nothing to our current practice of how we serve students. And we recommend it be rescinded.
Other comments, discussion?
Good to me.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor of moving policy JQKA back into public comment? Say aye.
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 All four said aye, so that motion passes. And then we just rescind, do we rescind just rescind the regulation, or do we?
It also has to go back out. It's
Okay,
the same
okay.
process, whether
So-
we're revising, reviewing, rescinding.
Okay, excuse me. So then all those in, oh, we need a motion, sorry.
So moved.
Second,
So we have a motion to move the regulation JQKA R-1 to be rescinded to public comment. All in favor, say aye.
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 So moved, or so, sorry, I'm going to get used to this. That motion passes. All right. Moving to new business.
Okay, so in our big cleanup job of foreign cultural exchange students and exchange students and all the bit, here we have a policy on the books, JQK, which is specific to exchange students. And it is also, as luck would have it, based on federal regulations dealing specifically with secondary school students. Thank you, Mr. Pruitt, for pointing out directly where it came from. Part 62 of the Exchange Visitor Program, Chapter G, Exchange Visitor Program, and Chapter I, Department of State, Title 22, Foreign Relations. So our federal government says this is how we expect our public schools to interact with other countries' students who wish to come study here. And while it's not absolutely necessary to have this policy on our local books because it's all based in federal law and we have to follow the federal law anyways, I would advise that we should keep JQK for the purpose of answering the question of anyone who searches our policy manual and types in the search word exchange students and wants to know, what do we do about exchange students? But simply, just as we did with JQKA, simplify it down to a reference back to the federal law to say, of course we welcome cultural exchange students into our schools. And that sentence redirects the reader back to the federal law. If the federal law changes in any way, which honestly, in this day and time, it may, if there ever time that we may be changing how we admit students from other places in the world, we wouldn't have to go back and revise our local policy every time. This is really best practice. We're referencing the federal law. So if the federal law changes in any way, shape, or form, we're still good because this directs the reader back to that place in Title 22 in the Department of State language.
So I had a question about two things. The high school, so you've clarified that we've added high school. So we don't do exchange students with middle schools or elementary schools in the district at all? Do we never have that opportunity?
I have never known us to do that or been requested to do that.
Okay.
Because, and part of it, and Mike, I think you and I talked about this, you know, a child that age wouldn't be eligible for a student visa. I think the student visa ties it in. You have to be of a certain age where you can travel without your parent or guardian. If you came as an elementary student, you would come with an adult who was enrolling you. Is that right, Mike? We talked around that.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's you know, what we normally call the exchange student program is secondary school. If you look on the Secretary of State's website, there may or may not be programs for lower ages, grades. I don't know, but
I believe that there are some for middle schools and elementary schools, but you're right that there's always a chaperone coming with them usually, I think. So maybe it's not the same. It's not the same thing. And it sounds like we don't do it anyway. So is that right? You think?
I've never known us to. Anyone with a better, longer memory than me, Dr. Thomas, Lynn, do you remember any questions about enrolling an elementary or middle school age student for a period of time as a,
No, I don't remember that.
I don't recall that either.
Okay. My other question had to do with the sequence of words accepts exchange visitor students in its high school. So is the word visitor necessary? Suddenly it appeared between exchange and student.
It's straight out of that regulation.
Okay.
That's how they
Yeah.
call it.
yeah, both in part 62 and subchapter G, it's called Exchange Visitor Program.
Exchange visitor program. Okay.
We could add the word program accepts exchange visitor program students if that adds clarity.
So you don't think we could just say exchange students?
We can.
I would suggest if we're citing the law that we use the term of the law.
Okay, then I would add program, exchange visitor program students. Because then that's, yeah, that's more like what the law is. Okay, any other comments from the committee? Tawana or Dr. Gant? Dr. Maddox or Dr. Gant?
Oh, I don't have any.
Okay, have we got them up? Go
Could
ahead.
we, just for a greater clarification, because we do have an amendment in terms of putting the word program. What if we put that in quotes? Yeah, exchange visitor program. Would that clarify that that is a terminology from a law that comes from someplace else, verbatim?
Or maybe italicized. I don't know.
Either way.
That whole sentence is new, that's highlighted in yellow. So we're basically striking the old language.
But we're just singling out the phrase, Don, exchange visitor program. Maybe put that in italicized and then
Okay.
follow it by.
Okay. And I'll capitalize exchange visitor program. That's actually how it is in the federal statute.
Okay, let's do that. And then I will move that be adopted by the committee.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor of moving policy JQK as revised to public comment, right? This goes to public comment? Or do we have to take it to the board and then get public comment?
Yes.
It goes to, it'll be on, actually with Dr. Thomas's permission, what I'd like to do with these that we're moving forward, that everyone's voting on tonight, is go ahead and add them as a very late addition, which I know we don't like to do, but in the interest of time and moving them through the policy process, they can go on your work session agenda for Thursday night, and then they'll be discussed and it'll be fresh on everyone's mind. And then they will move next week to be voted by the board to go out for 30 days. That's
Great.
it.
Okay, so they do go to the main board before they go up. Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving forward, there's policy AFC, emergency closing review. I believe this one is focused on the 12-month. No, it's actually so we're reviewing the policy and the regulation is being revised. This has to do with the superintendent's ability to close schools, but then there's a comment about 12-month personnel needing to show up for work. So if I understand it correctly, this is where we're switching the 248 days to 240, or what I heard earlier is that we're just going to say, under the terms of their employment, 12-month employees are required to be, no. How do you want to fix it so that we don't even refer to the number of days?
And Dr. Yeager, let me just say, just for clarification for the policy's knowledge, it's been the practice of the policy committee, if there's a slight change to a regulation, or alternatively, if there's a slight change to the policy that has a reg, but not to the other one, we bring them together as a package so they have the same date. So that's the answer to why you're being asked to move AFC policy, even though it's fine as it is with no revisions, forward to public comment and review so that we date it and say we've laid eyes on this date. Okay.
Okay. And I
But the
promise to,
change, you're correct. The change is in the reg.
Yeah, I would suggest we take those two together.
okay. Do we need a motion to combine them or we just take them together? So sorry, I'll get better at this. Do we want to, let's talk about the revision? Because there's just reviewing of the policy, and then we'll go and move them up together. Does that work?
Mhm.
Okay, so I also noticed that we've added some language about other kinds of emergencies to the regulation, which I understand, of course, why you've done that. It's my feeling that you could handle that by just adding a phrase at the top rather than have this sort of add-on thing at the end, or not? How strongly do you feel? Procedures, okay, back up. So let's handle the 240 versus 248 days first.
Well,
The second paragraph.
Pressure on that, Lynn?
I'd prefer that it be 12 month. And quite honestly, I don't even know why that whole sentence is in this policy. Now that I'm reviewing it again and reading it in context and trying to explain it to you, why that sentence is even necessary.
The whole paragraph, the whole inclement weather days.
If Dawn could go right back to it for just a second.
Yeah.
So
So
whether days
if
for
you remove this altogether. Can you see that on my screen, what I'm doing?
Yeah,
I see it all. Yes, Dr. Yeager, I'm not even sure if the whole paragraph is necessary.
Like,
because
is an option just can you see that what I just did, Lynn? Is that what you'd prefer? Just get that whole sentence?
I think definitely that sentence needs to be stricken, but I'm wondering, why are we even talking? Yeah,
because the next paragraph says
I see that.
personnel are required to be present unless the superintendent makes a public announcement, da, 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 da. So you don't need that second paragraph at all if you're.
Right,
Right.
because that would be with any employees, right? You would normally say,
Right. I mean, we
Staff
specify
report.
who is required to come in.
Right.
You know, it could be any number of combinations.
Yeah.
it could be
So
essential, it could be, right.
just strike the whole thing.
I say the whole thing,
Okay.
and then that next paragraph as well.
The one
Or
about,
to say that all employees will be required to be present unless.
The same thing I was thinking.
Right. I mean, because it could be all employees report, students don't report. All employees report, because sometimes a delayed opening for staff only is what we choose, because it's just so ridiculous to try to do a late start for students with, all those challenges, that we will just do a late start for employees. So why wouldn't we just say on days of inclement weather, staff will be required to be present unless the superintendent makes a public announcement canceling the need?
Aren't there circumstances when the superintendent has to keep, cabinet level officials operating or
We're always operating.
I'm just trying to, it seems like that there have been times when the central office has remained open, but all the schools have been closed, but maybe.
Right, that's what I'm saying, Mr. Davis, is if we just simply say on days of inclement weather, staff will be required to be present unless the superintendent or the representative makes a public announcement canceling the need for their attendance. So, so we would make the announcement, we we normally don't say central office personnel because that gets really confusing and people don't know whether that includes them or not. But, you know, it's likely to say 12-month employees report. Or all staff report at 10 a.m. or when safe.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, so I sort of saw this as, this seemed to be kind of the difference between the teaching faculty or the 9-month or 10-month faculty and then the full-time year-round faculty. But you make those distinctions when you call the cancellation anyway, right?
Right, right.
So just,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, there would be, I mean, the superintendent can call in maintenance, for instance, and all the other staff would not be expected to attend, right?
Right.
Correct.
Okay,
So
as long-
there's a significant other of 248 people are now 240 people. So let's just take front office staff, I mean, school district level office staff, human resources, Ms. Tillman that's on with us now, you know, any of them are 248, but we may not need them to be present,
Right.
but we may need maintenance to be present. So I don't know if I mean, there are global times when you might say all staff report for delayed start, like Ms. Duke said, but then there also may be times where you need some 12-month people there and other.
Right.
I think that's what you're saying, Lynn, right?
It is. And sometimes it's, you know, left up to the supervisor to communicate with their staff if they're required to be there or not. You know, I mean, custodians are 248, 240, whatever. And so they're needed sometimes to put ice down or salt down. And, you know, so it's just really, we tend to be very specific when we have to, you know, bring in part of our staff.
Okay, so what I'm sort of hearing is that the second and the third paragraph are not necessary. Is there anything in those two paragraphs that needs to get like tucked into the third paragraph, like the part about all employees will be paid? Or are both of those two paragraphs unnecessary? Or you just drop? Because the next sentence is, should the superintendent or the representative fail to publicly cancel any inclement weather, all employees will be required to be present, even though.
Right, instead of how many days, how many months, right? Is that what
Right,
you, Dr. Yeager?
yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe there needs to be one sentence before the third paragraph about the superintendent making a public announcement, canceling the need for their attendance or something, but make it general. All 12-month personnel or all staff.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm being anal, so please don't allow me to hinder this progress, but something about the way it reads, should the superintendent or representative fail to publicly counsel, fail means you just didn't do it,
Yeah,
right? Rather than you decided,
Choosing not to, right?
you decided to fail.
right, right. I mean, so that to me is one thing for me, whomever is the superintendent, to decide that a group of people need to come. That's not failing to counsel. So I don't know. Failure just means
Yeah.
inadequacy in my mind.
It's poorly worded. I agree.
Can I make a
Okay.
suggestion?
Yes,
Yes, you may.
So I think looking at what were the third and fourth, now second and third paragraphs, what we're trying to say is first sentence, if you're not told to show up, you got to show up. Second sentence, if you're told not to show up, we're still going to pay you.
Right.
That would be assumed for contract employees, but there are also non-contract employees, and we probably need that statement in policy to say we're going to pay them too. And then in the next paragraph, I don't see the need for that first sentence at all.
Excuse me.
Dr. Thomas was talking about. We just need to go straight into what happens if you weren't excused from attendance and you just didn't show up. That's the rest of it.
Yeah.
okay.
Right. Because that happens more often than not. So strike that.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so can you guys see what I'm in real time? Is that
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
excellent? Okay, strike that. And then I think I'm gonna strike all of this and just say all staff will be required to be present unless the superintendent, right? Makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
You know, I mean, this is a really good example. That was written because somewhere back in history, the superintendent failed to notify it, and so then they wrote it into policy. I mean, that's unfortunately how some policy is written, that it was in a response to an isolated incident, I think. So that's new. All staff in yellow will be required to be present unless the superintendent or the representative makes a public announcement. And then you go right into, I think that's right, Mike, if the employee is unable to comply with this requirement.
Yep.
Right? That's better.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just going to get rid of that so we don't confuse matters because we're not changing that.
Okay.
482, we're just striking all of it. Okay, let me show you. That's final version so far.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So then moving on to the next little clump of yellow. This is the one that seemed, is there anything different about these other procedures, public safety? Is there anything specifically different about a public safety closure, like we're doing right now, obviously, than there would be for the emergency inclement weather or other emergency conditions? So it felt like you could just add the words public safety under the very first paragraph where you say, well, the whole thing is called emergency weather conditions at the top. What if we got rid of emergency, what if we got rid of the word weather and just changed it to emergency conditions?
And under any emergency condition, or, because then we separate the second sentence there.
Yeah, under emergency conditions, comma, public health, comma, or inclement weather, or something like that. And then you don't, I don't see anything down there in that yellow text that adds anything different to the public health, public safety.
No, and you're right in guessing that, you know, again, the rabbit hole of policy was this came to our attention and Lynn was doing her work of cleaning up a move from 248 to 240, but it seemed like it would raise eyebrows if we were bringing forward a policy that spoke about emergency closings in the middle of our biggest emergency closing in recorded history. And we were speaking about weather because now we've got a virus. And so we were trying to honor that and not only revise one single part, but to make the policy stronger.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I just think you can get it included in the original text and not have to tack it on.
So you want to get rid of weather conditions?
So say, yeah, emergency conditions.
That is the name of the policy, is emergency closings.
Yeah. And then you can just get rid of all the mention of inclement weather days throughout. Just say emergency conditions. You could do an EG, public health or public safety or inclement weather if you want to be more specific. So, okay, here's my suggestion. Emergency conditions, period. Under emergency conditions, parentheses, inclement weather, public safety. Okay, maybe EG in front of inclement weather or public safety. And then all the rest of it.
EG colon, EG comma.
EG, E period, G period, comma. Inclement weather or public, what was it? Public safety.
Yeah.
Does it need to, do we need to go ahead and put et cetera in case something else happens that we could have known happening?
I'm happy with et cetera.
I mean, I don't know.
Okay, and then the rest of that is fine. Just get rid of the due to, and when Clarke County schools are closed, comma. So get rid of the due to inclement weather.
You see that?
on the, almost the second to last sentence of that first paragraph.
Okay. So just whenever we're closed, is that true? Every time we'd be closed, all extracurricular activities are canceled, or is that only inclement weather? It might be,
Good question, Dr. Thomas or whoever.
Well, I guess it depends on what that et cetera is, right?
Yeah.
Why don't we say are closed under emergency conditions? Because I can't very well see emergency conditions that would say, bring your kid to
Right,
training at
the
3.
football practice,
Yeah.
right? If it's an
Okay.
emergency condition, then we should all be home for what, if it's not safe to travel, if it's not safe
Okay,
to have
okay.
contact. Yes.
So instead of saying due to inclement weather, just say due to emergency conditions.
Right.
The last
Yeah.
sentence gives the
Yeah.
superintendent some,
Yes.
in case there's something we're not thinking about.
and that is a question that comes up a lot. So it's really important to state it in here because people always want to know, where does it say that we can't practice if school gets closed because of snow?
Right.
And that word counseled, and that is apparently misspelled and underlined by red.
It can be either way.
Oh, can it? Okay. I'm not much of a speller.
Okay, so the first paragraph then is good. And then the middle two are, don't have it. Oh, wait, I'm trying to see the edits. So then the next time we mention inclement weather, we just change it to emergency conditions.
Let me read that sentence again. Can you scroll down just a little bit, Dawn? Down, or the other way. Should inclement weather days cause changes in school calendar that adds to the number of annual working days for summer? Okay. I guess we haven't really had to do that since I've been in HR. It's an interesting full statement there.
Well, we did. So Mike pulled that straight out of, what was it, Mike? There was some federal guidance recently.
No, what I pulled out was that added thing. That sentence that y'all are talking about's been there.
Yeah, that sounds like something old.
This
Now,
one, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Get rid of it. It doesn't really make any sense. Does it? The vacation period? What does that mean?
Right.
Let's get rid of it if we can't explain it, maybe. Should weather days.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it means, to be honest.
None of us know what it
Well, I
means.
think, I'm sorry, Dr. Thomas, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think so. Some people were worried about this at the beginning of this pandemic that, well, what if we are tacking on days during the summer and having school longer? So I think this would address the point of what if we had teachers working more than, I guess this year their contracts are 248 days because we decided to try to make it up during June, July, and August, or May, June, July.
Oh, vacation period. See, we don't, that's antiquated language because we wouldn't call, well,
It's not really vacation.
We would call it the summer. I mean, what we would call it is just summer.
No, I think when it says vacation period, it's talking about your leave time, right?
That's how
well, teachers
So
don't have,
if I ended up working 250 days this year, y'all are going to give me 2 more vacation days. Is that what that's saying?
I think, I mean, I don't know if it's necessary at all. I'm just trying
Yeah, I
to
don't think
interpret
it
what's there.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, generally, well, first off, we haven't done that since I've been in HR for whatever, 8 years. But if I made somebody work longer than their contract, I would pay them for it.
Good point.
Yeah.
So
If we ever got in that unusual situation,
Yeah,
it'd take more than this sentence to figure out what to do.
Yeah. I would just strike that.
Okay, can we read through it one more time from the top?
Edits on that. Goodness.
Now, why are we adding that last paragraph?
I think we're not. We're
I
taking
don't
it
think
out.
we need to now.
Okay.
You want me to take it out?
Yeah.
Now, do we have to, the only thing that has is federal, state, and local government declaring the emergency. I don't know if that's, I mean, to me, that's that's where the superintendent justifies his or her actions. So I don't know why that has to be in there.
Nope.
I don't think it does.
Okay, so that looks simpler. This is good.
One down.
Okay. Do we have a motion to move it forward? We're now moving forward both policy AFC, which we have reviewed, and its regulation AFC R1. Have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Is Dr. Gant still with us?
Yes, I said aye.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so that carries and we send it to the work session. Okay, so moving on, policy GBM, professional personnel transfer. Sorry, let me pull this up in the one I can read. So this one looks like, again, it's coming from you, Lynn. Do you want to, or Dawn, do you want to?
No, Lynn will be best to explain this. This is a policy practice issue. What we do in practice doesn't align with policy, so we shore up the policy to match what we do, I think, right, Lynn?
Right. A few years ago, we got together with principals and came up with an agreed upon way to handle transfers in district. And our practice did not match this policy. And so we have cleaned up the language. The date down there where it talks about May 15th, that used to line up with what the PSC allowed. And then they extended it to June 15th and never moved it back during the recession. So we still can get out of contracts and move around in the district up until June 15th.
So that's state law? Or is that just practice?
I don't know, is that considered a state law as a PSC rule? I don't know if that's a state law or not, and I'm not a.
Yeah, well, it's a regulation with the force of law made by the State Department of Education.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a change for a misspelled word in that first sentence.
I was about to say that too, Mr.
I beat you.
Good job. You can spell, see?
Yeah, well, as long as they're one syllable words.
We're not going to trough the posts.
Right.
Could be interesting.
Okay, so the Director of Human Resources will ensure, is that, yeah, not ensure that vacant positions are posted through the Clarke County School District job posting system.
That title no longer exists. We could just say, I assume Mike, Human Resources will, or do we need to
Sure.
put it to Chief?
No, I think you can just say human resources. That's fine.
To get rid of the Director of.
And that way we don't have to worry about the current way we refer to. So Dawn, in that first paragraph, beginning of it, if you'll just strike the Director of.
Love taking out words out of policy. It's great.
So then it says professional employees may apply for any posted job through the normal application process, period. The employee will then enter the selection process for the new position, period. A transfer requested after June 15th will be considered by the Board of Education only if both the sending and receiving principals or supervisors approve the transfer, period. All right.
Do we want to get rid of that last sentence? I don't think this one actually has a reg to go with it.
You know, we used to say that for every single policy. And I think, Mike, you know, there's a lot of old ones that say, and if you need any procedures, the board directs the superintendent to develop them. But that is so obvious. That is the way we do business. Is that what you're saying?
Well, Yes,
unnecessary.
I mean, and if procedures means regulations, it's also at odds with the fact that those actually come through the board too. So
Yeah, so just delete it.
that's my suggestion.
Okay. Looks good. Do we have a motion
So moved.
to move this forward to the work session as edited, as revised? Is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Okay, it carries. Moving to the last one, GBRH, professional personnel leaves and absences. So this one didn't have much. Let's see, just the very end. This was the 240, 248 day thing again, right?
Right, and I would suggest that we just strike the days there and leave it at 12 months.
Perfect. I like that.
Simple is better.
And that's the only change to this one, correct?
I believe so, if memory serves, which,
Yep. I'm gonna take out the new highlighted 248 and there, that's correct now. If we just,
strike.
Yeah, and strike your comma.
Mhm.
12 month. Yep.
Okay, that's the only change, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So do we have a motion to move this forward to the work session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Greg, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay, it carries. Okay, so I think that is the end of the agenda, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So in terms of new ideas, I guess the only thing is how we move forward with this approach with Cognia. Do you want to talk about that now? Do we want to talk about that in the work session as a larger group and then come back to policy with the larger group's opinion on which ones policy needs to tackle first? Or do we want to propose to the full board what our preference is to tackle first? How do you feel about that?
I would. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. In addition, let me point out that we have on the books in just 16 days on May 21st, the May policy committee meeting. Because this, although we're in May, was really the April policy committee meeting that was
Right.
postponed a little bit.
Right.
And so just subsequent to this discussion, sorry to jump in, but we might want to decide what to do with that May meeting.
Okay, good point. I would suggest that what was on the plan, Dawn? Do you know what was on the plan for the May 21st?
Unless any directors or chiefs have any policies that they bring to my attention to move through the policy process, I don't have anything on the plan right now.
Okay, and this will be your last policy committee meeting?
Well,
Oh, no, you'll be there in June, excuse me. Okay. So we still have 2 more meetings with you. Okay. Go ahead.
So we could do it however, I mean, we have enough to do. I'm not suggesting there's not things to do. And certainly as a result of the Cognia report, we could start tackling, as you've suggested, from whichever end we want. We could start with the ones, B policies are not the easiest ones to tackle, as we know from the last couple of years. So while it might be necessary, revisiting something like the code of ethics, I would suggest might be best aligned with some of the upcoming board training. You know, it might work best to have time to have discussions and then suggest any revisions to the ethics policy if necessary, but
Yeah, I agree. So maybe we do the easy stuff first with the really old, maybe reviewing all the old red policies, just reading through them and seeing if there's anything, just kind of move them by bulk up through after review?
We could do that. If you tell me how many you want, I'll put, because what I'll need to do is push them to the right division to look at policies. Let me just look really quick. Like if we looked at that and we said we're going to go from last revised. Some of these are C policies that are really old.
Dawn, are there any HR policies left that need reviewing that are really old? Because if we could push those through before Meredith goes to, she's 220, so.
That's a good idea. There
we
are
could-
that she had in the queue. There are, Lynn. We could grab those out and do personnel policies to try to, we could make a good faith effort to finish out the Gs.
Okay,
Already started down that road. I think that's as good an idea as any.
Yeah.
Most of it is legal compliance anyway, so there's not a lot of,
okay. What I don't want to do is put a big pile on somebody's plate who's got a lot to do this month. So Lynn, if you're able to handle these while Meredith is still here, you said?
That would be best. And I think, to be honest, I think she has done a lot of them already because
Okay,
kind of on a roll there for a while, and then y'all switched to the B policies. So.
okay. That sounds good. And then Dr. Gant, can we maybe make a plan as you already are underway to work on norms and such to work on the B policies after some training?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think some of the work we've already started, but I do think as it relates to some of the policies that were specifically like indicated by the report, I do think we should prioritize those as well. And I think some of them may be, well, I mean, we say a lot of things shouldn't take long, but some of them are a little bit smaller. And so, but I think a significant portion of the policy committee's attention also should be geared towards those things that were considered like high priority areas. So both of those policies that are both, outdated, but then also the ones that were problematic. And I do see, I'm hoping that the policy committee can work through those those that are quick, those that are easier to be solved. I'm hoping we can work through those a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Even
I agree.
Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
okay, even in terms of the BH, the ethic. I mean, reading through the Cognia material, it seemed like that if we could, for clarification's sake, because I mean that came right out of ESBA. So, but what it doesn't say is the fact that the board will review BH on a yearly basis, and board members will sign, sign their understanding of it. And so, maybe I'm naive, but it just seems like that would be a relatively quick fix, because even though it's, BH is very lengthy and is open for interpretation. I mean, the bulk of it, I mean, it all came from Georgia School Board Association, so, which was driven by the state board. So it would just seem like that we just need to clarify that we are going to review it yearly, and that we're also, we'll have, training in ethics on a yearly basis, and we will sign the document, sign something saying that we have reviewed ethics, board ethics. So I would think that would be easy.
It's actually already in there, Greg.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, I don't think you have to do a thing with BH.
Does it say we're going to sign it, Mike?
Yep, if you look down there, conduct as a board member, number 6, file annually with the local superintendent and the State Board of Education a written statement certifying that he or she is in compliance with this code of ethics.
Okay, I stand corrected then. I'm sorry.
I really do think a lot of the Cognia recommendations were not policy change, which is reminders. That's a good one. Here, this one.
Yeah, that was my read too, Dawn, what you said earlier about there's certain B policies that they highlighted that we didn't seem to be following very well. It wasn't that they were not correctly worded. Now, I think John Knox came up at some point and pointed out there's some inconsistencies in one of the policies that they seem to cite one part of it, but then not recognize that there was another part of it. I forget which one that was.
BC.
BC?
Yeah.
So there's some that we probably want to revisit. But
Start with
go ahead.
BC.
Say that
If
again?
I could make a suggestion while we're on this topic. Oh, I'm sorry, Greg. I thought she was talking to me.
Yeah.
I'd say that for Lynn, as she's looking at these G policies for the next meeting, but as you go through this in general, I have advocated before for the less is more approach. I understand, the desire to have a lot of policies for different reasons, but I would suggest that, as you say, Cognia has pointed out two things: old policies and failure to follow policies. And I think both of those are a direct result of having so many policies that you can't keep up with them.
Right.
So, there's a saying that I forgot who said this, but some famous writer giving writing advice said, "Murder your darlings," meaning go back through what you've written and the stuff that you thought was just the cutest, greatest, cleverest, get rid of it. So something to keep in mind.
Okay, sounds like good advice. So it sounds like by the May 21st policy committee, we may have a list of G policies. We should all review the G policies, perhaps the old G policies. And Lynn, you would have some recommendations for us, perhaps? Is that a
I
good
guess tell me
plan?
how many, I'm sorry, Dr. Geiger, how many do y'all want at a
How many can you manage?
time more than y'all could, I would imagine.
Well,
See, there being this vast amount of changes because things that needed changing we have brought to you, so.
well, if it's a matter of, well, here's these 10, I've read through all these 10, we can all read through these 10 and
Okay.
not change them. Awesome, then we get to put an April or May 2020
Right.
date on them, right? So
I'm sure there'll
I'm
be
okay
little-
with,
Okay,
unless there's some that are really problematic and we might need to talk about, let's, I mean, I don't know about the rest of the committee, but my teaching is done and I've got a little bit of time right now, so let's jump.
Well, if we can get rid of some policies too, I back up what Mike said.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree too. Let's
Why don't
try
you
to
give them
work.
another read, Lynn? The ones that, with that mind's eye, the ones that we were going to review, will you go back and do a pass and see whether they're necessary? And what we might be doing is rescinding some that we thought we were reviewing. And
Okay.
we need Mike's input because there might be some things we don't want to rescind, but I want maybe 15 or 20 that are left in that pile, but that's just my best guess. We'll talk about it tomorrow and look at the list.
We'll try to get them all ready and then as many as y'all get to,
Yeah, especially if Meredith is disappearing and you want to get them done early, then they're on the list and we just chunk through them as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That sounds like a good plan. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Is there any other discussion?
That's it for me. We'll have our other items for Thursday.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. Policy Committee meeting is adjourned at 6:06.